Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2020 show. I'm your host, Don K. We are once again coming from the race shop of Grant King Racers. And if you're looking for a place to have a Thanksgiving or a Christmas party someplace different, why not come here? A lot of interesting things to look at. If you got kids, I always like to look at cars. So if you're interested, call the office, tell them what you need, see what they can do to help you. Number is 317-820-3595. Today's show is presented by Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT INDYCAR Series, the SVRA, and McGilvery's Pub and Eatery and Speedway. And just remember, everybody has said over the years, if they didn't have smoking, we'd come in there. Well, they quit smoking, so now's the time to go. Stop in. They've remodeled it. It's really a great place to go, and you'll love it. A couple things. If Christmas is right around the corner, from what I'm told, and if you've got a fan in the family, or a friend that was looking for something different to give them as a Christmas gift, why not check out the Indy500shop.com. They have everything that has to do with INDYCAR. I mean, there's almost nothing you can ask that they don't have. So look it up, Indy500shop.com. Michael Spangle is the man in charge, and you can give him a call, talk to him about it, see what he's got that you're interested in. His cell number is 317-985-0214. Do you ever have computer problems? I know I'm pretty good at that. We have a new computer doctor. It's a affordable computer doctor. Steve Freeze is a man. He can help you. So give him a call, tell him your problem. If need be, you'll make a house call. Number is 317-328-0766. You have a need for a dentist? Everybody goes, oh boy, I can't wait to go there. Well, I'm going to tell you someplace you will look forward to going to. It's the Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have one of the top practices in the state. You'll love it. They got great people. So give them a call, make an appointment. Number is 317-846-6125. And if you ever wondered what it'd be like to drive your favorite car in your favorite racetrack, from dirt midgets at the Chili Bowl to Formula One car at Nuremberg, Indy Simulation can put you in the driver's seat of their Sim Experience full motion race simulator. Take your choice of over 160 cars and tracks in the iRacing. The same real-world simulation professional drivers use to race their real-world rivals. Learn more tracks and stay sharp between races. Visit IndySim.com today and book a free ride for their demonstration. I guarantee you'll love it. If you haven't been over to the museum yet, you need to stop by. The Andy Granatelli display is there. It's quite interesting. I think it'd be worth your visit. So stop by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum and check it out. Ever wonder why these guys and gals drive Indy cars? We can find out. Take a ride in the Indy Racing Experience two-seater. You can go to IndyRacingExperience.com and find a date that'll work for you. And I'm not sure if their complete schedule is up yet, but they will have 10 dates at the Speedway. You can check the website, IndyRacingExperience.com, or you can call the office at 317-243-7171. Talk to Shonda. And if you go online in the promo box, put DK1, you get a 50% discount. It's worth it. It's a thrill of a lifetime. You'll love it. Is it time to get new insurance for your home, your car, or commercial property? Do what most of us have done. We call Mike Pardee at VP Insurance. They're located at 5004 West 16th Street in Speedway. Give them a call. Tell them what you need. You'll find you get more coverage for less money. His number is 317-248-0070. And if you're into the Trans Am world or the vintage Indy cars and other vintage cars, you got to go to svra.com and check them out. And while you're there, subscribe to Speed Tour Magazine. It is one of the best magazines, first class, great stories, great pictures. You'll enjoy it. And while you're there, check the schedule. There's 21 schedule is out, so check it out. And if you're anywhere near one of their events, I highly encourage you to check it. Go there. You'll love it. Do you have a vintage Indy car, or would you like to get one? Or you need yours restored? Grant King Race Shops can take care of it. Give them a call, tell them what you got or what you're looking for, and they can help you. The number is 317-820-3595. Now, my guest today is a gentleman that we talked for the first 3 minutes here, and we bonded. It's amazing. He is currently the Senior Corporate Counsel for, I assume, for Penske Entertainment, and he's an accomplished attorney and has many successes along the way. Among other things, he was a law clerk for the Justice Frank Sullivan, and went on to become a partner in the litigation department of Barnes and Thornburg, which is one of the top 100 in America. Please welcome Mr. Jimmie McMillan. Jimmie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, tell me, when I look at your bio, my gosh, you've been accomplished an awful lot. When you started in high school, first off, where'd you go to high school? Where were you born and raised?
I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago.
Really? My
Yep.
hometown.
Me too.
My hometown, Chicago. All right. No wonder you're successful. You're from Chicago.
It does create a certain type of person.
And of course, you're a White Sox fan.
I'm a Cubs fan. My grandfather watched the Cubs.
Sorry?
So.
Yeah,
I didn't hear you. I
baby.
can't hear you.
Woo!
I didn't hear that. The sound went away. So anyway, when you started in school, what was your goal? Did you want to become an attorney? Was that what you said? I want to be a lawyer.
Absolutely. I was either going to be a lawyer or a preacher, and my mother said I like women too much, so I had to go into the law.
Were either of your parents in the law? Were either of your parents in law?
They were not. My mother was a teacher. She taught special education for 36 years and was phenomenal at it.
Huh. So when you left high school, where did you go to college?
I went to college at Michigan State. Actually, when I was 16 years old, I started college.
Jeez.
And while I was there, my father, who had an alcohol problem, came up to the dorm one day and threatened to shoot me in the dorm. So I hid out in Detroit until my stepbrother, who went to IU Bloomington, came down to get me. He was 9 years older than me. He came down and got me and moved me here. And then a couple of months after I was here, my father shot my mother and I flunked out of college.
Jeez. You had a rough start.
Yep, but I've been blessed. I was blessed enough to my mother survived. And I promised God if she did survive, I would get back in school. I worked at a Firestone, which is kind of when I got exposed to racing. I started as a tire changer at Firestone and worked my way up to manager. And during that time was when I met a lot of guys down in Bloomington from the south side of Bloomington who used to listen to NASCAR, and they'd listen to the race in the shop. And they used to tease me because I knew absolutely nothing about racing. And they are the ones who kind of taught me on Sundays about racing. And they brought me to my first race to the Brickyard. And they, Southern Indiana white guys who basically said, don't worry, you'll be safe. I was the only black guy that I could see around. And there were Confederate flags and the South will rise again. But I had such a good time with them. And as soon as I saw the cars and heard them and had the experience, I fell in love with it. And that's how I fell in love with racing. I was able to get back in school. I did extremely well. Got straight A's for the last year of college, straight A's and B's my second year. Applied to law school, got accepted to IU McKinney here in Indianapolis, and was off to the races.
Yeah, literally. How did you end up? What I've heard when they just talked, we're interviewing Justice Barrett, working as a law clerk is a big deal for a young up-and-coming attorney, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And working for Justice Sullivan, if anybody knows anything about Indiana, he is one of the premier judges in the state. He's now a professor at the law school, but he was like a father to me and continues to be. The things that he exposed me to were things that I didn't have any exposure to coming up on the south side of Chicago. And it was more than just being a law clerk. I had the opportunity to sit on panels, for example, of all the judges, things that he sent me to, and his reputation really carried my career in the very beginning. He had me write speeches for him, just a number of different committees and things that he would send me to intentionally so that I could get exposed to things that I wouldn't have had that opportunity but for clerking for an Indiana Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, I never realized how important that was, but from the last two judges that have been elevated to justice in the Supreme Court, that came up being a law clerk. And I thought, wow, that's got to be huge to be a law clerk for a justice for sure. Since you've gotten into the business and got into litigation with one of the top Barnes and Thornburg in the state of Indiana. How did that help you, and how did you end up at Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Well, first of all, the law firm actually, the law firm is a great training ground to cut your teeth at. The experience you get working with some of the best lawyers, not only in the state, but across the country, and the type of matters you work on. You really learn how to be a top level lawyer, how to be thorough. At Barnes and Thornburg, I was there for 12 years, worked my way up to partner, and I was able to, with a man named Mark Owens, we started the motorsports practice group at Barnes, and that was a group that worked with an organization called the Indiana Motorsports Association. It used to exist. It was a phenomenal group. I wish it would come back, but it was essentially people who are associated with motorsports around the country would come together quarterly to talk about issues in business and what was going on in the industry, particularly in Indiana. And I and Mark were like one of 2 or 3 lawyers who actually would come to those meetings. And it gave me a chance to interact and talk about, talk with real business owners about how our services, challenges that they face, get my foot in the door in the industry. How I actually ended up in Indianapolis Motor Speedway was because I'm also the president of the largest motorcycle club in the state, a club called 317 Riders MC. And at the time, I wanted to do a charity ride for the Christmore House. The Christmore House is located in Hawville, which, as you know, is right up the street from the Speedway. And I had the bright idea that we would do the charity ride at the track. None of us, all being primarily African-American, none of us knew anybody at the Speedway. Most of us had never even been to the track. I was the only one that had actually been to the track. And so I put my suit on, and by virtue of me being a lawyer at Barnes, probably got access and was able to set up a meeting with Mel Harder and have a meeting with the folks who were here to convince them to let us use the track for free to do this motorcycle fundraiser called the Midwest Breakout Ride. And from that, we had 8,000 bikers who came to the track. And it was the largest number, they felt like it was the largest number of African Americans that had been to the track pretty much for any reason, including the race. And we were so impressed that started a relationship. So then when MotoGP came, we became kind of the rolling advertisers for MotoGP. The track would give us assets to provide when we went to different events around the country to convince other motorcycle clubs to come to the track and participate in MotoGP. And then that just allowed that relationship continue to build and grow with everyone internally. And that ultimately was how I developed the relationship. It ended up here. It was because my motorcycle and my community work basically led to me eventually coming here from Barnes.
And of course, the first man you mentioned that you met with was the right one to go to. He was a motorcycle guy anyway, Mel Harder.
Absolutely. Mel is absolutely phenomenal. We continue to share a really close relationship today, and he continues to give me great advice about the industry.
And you are serving on a number of boards, and one of them is the Marion County Public Defenders Agency and the Indianapolis Urban League. You go out of your way to mentor, I suppose, minorities, to tell them that the world is there. You just got to work to get there, is my assumption as to what you have in this diversity programs that you are currently involved in.
Yes, recently I was blessed to be named the Chief Diversity Officer for Penske Entertainment. In addition to continuing to be Senior Corporate Counsel, I actually work 2 jobs, which a lot of people get a kick out of. But it really is a passion of mine and has been that way for a long time to encourage, women and people of color to continue to pursue their dreams, pursue their careers, despite whatever obstacles they may face, but also to talk to people from majority cultures about the challenges that are out there. And for those who are interested and willing and desire it, to introduce them to quality, academically qualified, some of the best and brightest folks who can basically help businesses grow. And that was my passion before. And it's just great now that I've been given this platform by Roger Penske and Mark Miles and Doug Bowes and Allison to now bring that passion to both IMS INDYCAR and IMS Productions?
It's interesting to me. As you can see, I'm not a kid. I've been around for a while, and one of the first black drivers I ever got to meet was in the late 60s. His name was Wendell Scott, and he was in NASCAR before NASCAR was really NASCAR. I mean, it was when races I went to back then, you could shoot a gun in the grandstand, not hit anybody. It wasn't that big yet, but he would always come to the races, and I went to most of them, not all, but most of them. And it always interested me. I couldn't figure out why he was always outside. Everybody had a garage except Wendell. So I went to one of the officials. I said, how come Wendell doesn't have a garage? He said, simple. Garages are assigned by first come, first serve, and he's always the last one here. Well, he had a car service business, so he had to work. He brought his two sons and another friend, and they were always the last ones there, so they were outside. What he went through, I discovered after talking to him. He won a race, what was that early NASCAR, he won a race on a dirt track somewhere. They wouldn't give him the trophy. They wouldn't give him the prize money. And that's the kind of stuff he had to put up with. And of course, it's gotten better since then. But what is the intention of the diversity program with INDYCAR and IMS?
So we, like many other industries this year, in the wake of George Floyd, especially industries and sports, we announced the 4th of July, a race for equality and change. But our work in diversity had actually begun long before that. Mark Miles and myself had internally chaired a diversity committee. And the goal, number one, is getting our internal house in order. And that's in terms of recruiting, retention, and development of diverse employees. If you look within the industry, I think particularly from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway side, we have some phenomenal leadership in terms of women. My general counsel, Gretchen Snelling, has been a leader in the legal department for 16 years. It's phenomenal. Our hospitality is run by Ellen Saul. She's a phenomenal leader. Tickets is run by Kelly Lehman. We have great leadership, particularly from women, but we have been completely lacking, I believe, in leadership and the development of people of color. And that's a point that was kind of drawn out by what happened by George Floyd when we looked internally, but we already knew that was an issue. For years, motorsports as a whole has been criticized for a lack of outreach to minority community. There are people that we know, one of the most common sayings in Indianapolis from people of color is, I have never been to the track, or I never thought that the track wanted me there, or I didn't think this was a place that I was welcome to go. And that comes from people who live less than 2 blocks from the track, people who live in Hawville, people who have been a part of this community for 30, 40 years have always said, why would I go there? Or they don't want me there. Our goal is to change that perception. We want to, one, change it from an internal standpoint. We want to make sure that we are a welcoming and inclusive, culturally inclusive place to work for our best and brightest. We also want to make sure that we are doing business from a diversity and procurement standpoint with minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. We think that's important in terms of social justice to make sure that all are getting opportunities and that we're hiring people based on the quality of work that they provide, and that we're looking at different folks than we commonly do and not always going to the same well, and thus not necessarily opening ourselves up to perhaps a better deal, better results, or a different perspective. We also are looking at the series. We're looking at the people that work in the series. When you talk to folks at INDYCAR, they talk about the fact that their engineers are getting older, their pit crew teams are getting older, and they want to get younger and they want to get more diverse. And we're talking about pipelines and looking at pipelines for people, particularly women, people of color. Are they pipelining into the STEM programs, into the training programs, the technological programs, the trade school programs that will allow them to be the next engineers or crew chiefs of the future for INDYCAR? So we're looking at that. We're looking at drivers. We're looking at, who's going to be, will we develop an African-American driver in the series? Will we have a woman that can come and compete in the series? And also we're looking at ownership. As you know, Michael Jordan recently bought a team in NASCAR that Bubba Wallace will be driving for. We're also looking forward to diversify our ownership as well. Finally, we're looking at investing in our community. You know, one of the things that motorsports has been probably lacking in is teaching and exposing diverse populations about why anyone would want to come somewhere and sit for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours and watch cars go in a circle. Why do you do that? What's exciting about that? Why does it seem like the same car is in front the entire time and you want to watch that? We have to do better at educating and telling folks about the 101 of racing and why this is important, and inviting people to the table to learn about the thing that we're so passionate about. When I learned about it, when somebody was able to explain it to me, I haven't fallen out of love with it since. And I think we as a sport have to do better with that.
You know, it concerned me a little bit because I've been around for 65 years or more. And when the Indy Racing League started in 1996, a driver came in. His name was George Mack from Los Angeles. He was a black driver. I think he drove for 1 year. I can't remember if it was for 2. But he came in. Nobody said, I mean, I worked on a team. I worked for Dick Simon Racing. So I was in the garages and knew everybody. And nobody said boo. I mean, he was here. He was a driver. He was competitive. So be it. And then Dick Simon hired an engineer who was black. He was a graduate of I forget what college, but he came in to work for a couple of years to understand aerodynamics, to understand suspension and how it worked on these cars. And he was very good and a nice guy. And he stayed at 2 years. He learned what he wanted to learn, and he went on to something else. My point being, I've never, ever, that I'm aware of, ever heard of anybody saying, we don't want him or we don't want her. I never heard that. I got to assume, a good friend of mine, whom I'm sure you know, Willie T., said there's some really good drivers in the wings that are capable and should be capable of coming to INDYCAR. Are you doing anything to help them or give them the guidance to get to where they want to get to the Road to Indy program, then move up to INDYCAR?
Yes, we are working on that, and Roger is very engaged in that. I want to talk about a little bit about the first point you brought up about whether anyone has particularly and specifically said, you're not welcome here. I think one of the things and challenges that we have with being exclusive is sometimes, particularly in racing, there is a generational handing down and almost a caste system of, it's not necessarily that you don't invite, or it's not necessarily that you say black people are not allowed here, or people of color are not allowed here, or women are not allowed here. But if you always hire from within and you always offer positions and opportunities primarily to the people that you know and the people that are in your circle, then you may not ever actually invite or include others. And I think that's more prevalent, particularly when you talk about the race teams and racing itself. What two things are more prevalent? One, it's undeniable that it takes money to race.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And that the fastest person is often not the person that gets the seat in the car. That speed is one part, but money is certainly a part as well. And you can be fast and not get a chance to drive. You can be good and not get a chance to participate if you don't have the money. So that's one. And many times, unfortunately, there are people of color who don't have the money. Two, setting that aside, we also know that just as a matter of course, opportunities such as equipment, sharing equipment, getting the opportunity to learn the sport, getting the opportunity to even work in a shop and sweep up a shop, or just hang around with the fellas or women to learn the sport, typically come because of relationships. And so if you're not in the relationship and you're not invited to the relationship, then you may never get a seat at the table to learn how to be a part of the sport. We aren't in relationship. And that effort and lack of effort to build relationships with people that are different sometimes leaves people excluded, although not intentionally from a racist or sexist perspective. So I wanted to address that. In terms of what we're doing about that, we have Next Gen Racers, which is a program run by Coach Rod Reed, which I wouldn't call necessarily a driver development program, but it does allow kids, kids of color and women, young ladies, age 12 to 15 or 11 to 15, to come out to the track and participate in a karting program that's run by Coach Reed. And they come out every weekend and they get a chance to first learn about STEM related to racing and get engaged in karting, get in the karts and learn how to drive and operate a kart. It's a character development program, it's a STEM program, and it's a pipeline program for kids to be in the racing. It's not necessarily a driver development program on the front end. Now, some of those kids we anticipate are going to participate as we've developed the program and got engaged this year. And as we support and find more support for Coach Reed, we're hoping that some of those kids go up to a more competitive series and get involved in Indy Lights. Roger, as part of his initiative, is actually working behind the scenes with Coach Reed to analyze, look, and develop a racing program that will identify kids of color and women, diverse drivers, and diverse crew chiefs, and diverse engineers to learn behind the scenes under his Tim Cendrick and the Penske program to learn more and be more involved in racing. So that is actively going on as part of our race for equality and change.
Have you met Danny White? He runs the motorsports program at Purdue University.
I have met and worked with Danny, yes.
And it seems to me, I haven't talked to him in a while, but when I had him on the program one night, he was saying that he's had a lot of his students get internships during race season and, you know, during the summer when there's no school, to get in with race teams and work with them and get a feel for it. And I guess some of them have actually gone on to become crew members. Are any of the people that you're interested in his program? I haven't asked him that, so I'll ask you if you probably will know.
Yes, I mean, we're interested in working with Purdue, IU. We've actually had outreach to all of the universities in terms of the internships that we offer here at IMS. We have about 20 to 24 internal internships at IMS. We've also talked to some of the teams about their internship capacity and their jobs, and have already received great responses from the teams in terms of their eagerness to participate in the programs that we have, to be referred candidates for different jobs that they have and internships that they have. And we're also out talking to our promoters for our different events to figure out what they're doing and what they're involved in on the diversity front that we can support. So we're pulling all this information together to try to create, again, pipelines into different opportunities for folks that are interested in the sport, where those pipelines might not naturally exist. Time and time again, what I hear is, look, we're ready, willing, able, eager. We want folks who are interested in the sport, regardless of their race or gender, to have the opportunity. If they got the skills and the passion and the drive, we want them to be a part of our team. We want them to be a part of our sport. But Jimmie, we just don't get the applications, or we just don't know where to go to connect with those folks. And I'm hopeful that my role is to be the bridge and the conduit between those who are willing and interested and those who have the passion but don't know how to get engaged and involved in the sport. I'm trying to stand in the lurch and be that bridge for them to cross over and get to where they can live out and work their passion.
Well, I was surprised a little earlier when you said people that you have become acquainted with or learn about that live within just a few blocks of the Speedway thought they were not welcome. I've never heard anything like that. I mean, you know, the gates are open. If you buy a ticket for $10, they don't say, well, you can't get in because, and it seems it's a sport that a lot of minorities don't understand, and thus don't follow. And I think that's where you got to change things, as you indicated, to get the interest. And then once that happens, and some kid says to his dad, hey, or to his mom, she's the one that pulls the strings, I'd like to get into this. And that's how they get started. It's had a lot of these guys that are driving now got started. And as you probably are aware, back when Indy Racing League started, there was 2 or 3 females that drove. A couple of them I wish were still here. Simone de Silvestro was an outstanding driver. And Bia from Brazil was also an outstanding driver. She's now a mother and is driving sports cars in Brazil, I understand. But it seems the doors have been open. It's just the quality. In fact, I worked with Janet Guthrie when she came. Um, so the doors have been open. And when she was here, she did get a little bit of grief. But when the guys find out that she could drive a car, all that stuff kind of came to an end.
Yeah, I think the doors are open, but you can have a door open to a restaurant, but if the culture inside of that restaurant is not welcoming and inclusive, and culture includes a lot of things, right? It's what pictures are on the wall, who's celebrated and who is not. It's Confederate flags waving. It's the South will rise again shirts. It's somebody throwing drinks at you in the stands and you don't understand why. It is whether anybody who's on the field of play or on the track that looks like you and is celebrated. It's the music that's played. Is there music being played that is traditionally celebratory towards my culture, or is it music being played that's celebratory towards another culture? You can do a lot of things implicitly that can say either A, you're welcome and we want you here, or you can do things that are implicit that say, yes, the doors are open, but this is not necessarily your thing. This is my thing. And unless you're willing to culturally assimilate with me, don't come, even though the doors are open. And so I think, at least in this community, there's been a lot of fear and hesitation by the greater community to come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and for racing for many years. Certainly the doors are open, and our leadership has never felt that way. The family didn't feel that way. But, you know, the cultural awakening that needs to happen is really across the country, and it really goes both internally and externally all the way around. And one of the things I'm constantly telling our marketing department is we do have fans of color. We do have women that are fans. We need to celebrate those people who have been coming for years and who have been coming through the door and have had great experiences. I have never had a bad day. I haven't had a bad second at work since I started here on May 2nd, 2016. It is my absolute joy coming to this place every day. And my mom, who knew nothing about racing, is now a huge fan. She's from Mississippi. She thought, when I came here, she thought, her first question was, are you sure that place is going to stay open? She was concerned that I was crazy for leaving the firm to come here. And now she has an entourage of brothers and sisters from Mississippi and Alabama who come up for the 500. We're about 50, 60 strong at the 500. All African-American. These are all people who knew nothing about racing. Nothing. If you know anything about people from the South, it's hard to get them to come north. They think there's always a blizzard. They now are passionate racing fans just from getting the exposure of a 500. And that's what I'm trying to, and Mark and Roger and everybody want, is if we can make people feel welcome and invited, and actually, rather than just open the door, but stick our hands out and say, no, come on in. We particularly want you. And we want to create an environment where you're celebrated just like we celebrate everyone else, and you have fun just like everyone else. If we can do that, man, I think the sport is going to grow, and it's going to be good for the sport, and it's going to be good for the fans.
You're right. But getting back to this restaurant business, I go to restaurants, not as much as we used to. We got once or twice, and I go into some and they play music, and I haven't a clue what it is. It's loud. It makes no sense. You can't understand what's being said. But if the food's good, I don't care. I can shut my ears off. We go to all kinds of restaurants. We've been in there, and we're the only white ones in it. I don't care. As long as the food's good, I'm there. We like it, and I think there's something to what you say, and I totally agree with you that you have to be welcome. But I was welcomed when we went into a restaurant, and barbecue and stuff was their specialty, whatever it was. And it was outstanding. And we've been back several times. And again, we're the only ones there. And nobody's ever said, what are you doing here? They just handed me a check and I paid the bill and we said, thank you, it was good. So I think, what you're trying to accomplish is good. I think once people see this sport and get in with the crowd and be a part of it and finally figure out that it's not the same guy leading all the time, there's a lot of things going on. And I think Roger has gone to the degree of putting scoreboards up where you can see that, where you can see from anywhere on the facility what's going on in areas you can't follow, and it get the scoreboard. You get to get an idea of what's going on. And I think you're right, it will build the sport, and people get excited to come here. Because a friend of mine that got me hooked on this sport, been coming here since 1952. And he convinced me to come, and I've been coming here since 1960 or 61. But so I got so hooked, I moved here. So I left Florida to move here, which was even more intelligent. But it's a sport that I think, the people in it, I've never met anybody in the sport that I thought was a numbskull. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a couple I can think of, but I mean, it's intelligent people that, that they have a good time. When I first started going, and I go to short track racing, I used to go down to the Soldier Field in Chicago when Andy Granatelli was promoting the midget races. And I followed it since then. And the drivers would have a problem with each other. They go out in the parking lot with a 2x4 and they settle it. And the next morning you'd see the two of them trading parts to get their cars fixed to go race that night. So it's an interesting sport. It's got some interesting people in it. And I think for the most part, you don't find anybody in this sport that, beats their wives or does any of that. They might have a few more beers than is necessary, but they're really genuinely good people, because the guy behind the wheel of the car, his life depends on what you do, and they do it well. And it's an interesting sport. And for kids to get involved and learn about it and want to get into it, I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. I think there's opportunities for anybody. If they're good, welcome. In fact, as I'm sure you're aware, the head engineer for Firestone is a young lady.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting when you juxtapose INDYCAR and NASCAR with drag racing and NHRA, and how when you look at issues of diversity, particularly with women, as you know, you have a number of women in NHRA and drag racing. I always tell folks when they're first trying to figure out, should I go to a race? A lot of times my recommendation, if they say, I'm thinking about racing, I'm thinking about taking my family, my kids, my wife, I say, go try Grand Nationals. Go try to take them to NHRA on Labor Day weekend. And they go, why? And I go, because every time I've taken a diverse group of folks to a drag race, I don't know if it's because it's just a simpler concept of, hey, we're going to pick a car, left, right, who's going to win, and the power and the closeness and everything that comes along with drag racing. And it's easy, it's just an easy concept to get from a racing perspective. They have a blast. And you go to tracks across this country. I was talking to Forrest Lucas, and he was talking about the same concept, that drag racing historically in certain communities, whether it's the Latino community and the African-American community, that has seemed to have been more entrenched. Some people believe it's because it was a run what you brung type situation where you could work on your own car and hot rod and whatever, and you didn't necessarily need that established setup that you needed for an IndyCar, NASCAR. But that's proof, that love is proof that those communities, those folks do like racing when they have an opportunity for entry and participation. And I think we just got to take some of that magic and put it into IndyCar and NASCAR and figure out how, some of what they do well, we can emulate, and making our sport as welcoming and inclusive as possible.
Well, having talked and listened to you for the last 45 minutes of your time, where can I sign up? Will they take old people too?
we take all people, and I actually have great respect and value from you. I could talk to you all day, because I know I would learn a tremendous amount, and I'm still learning. We definitely want you. I think people like you are the key to making people feel welcome, because I'm going to be blunt. When I came here, so one of the things I used to do at Barnes, you talked about my mentoring. I go out and visit a lot of schools, IPS schools, charter schools. And when I was at Barnes, I used to talk about, being a lawyer. So when I came here, those same schools were reaching out to me saying, hey, oh man, can you come and tell us about the Indy 500, IMS? And I go down and I say, okay, well, where's the DVD? Where's like the thing, that you're going to take to the kids? And here's a fun way to say, this is what racing is about. We don't have that. We don't have a thing to take out to kids and take out to the community. And we don't have a thing that's online that says, this is racing 101. And we're not just talking about diverse communities. We're talking about for any community. We've got to build that level for people who don't know about the sport and don't have someone sitting there. People figure out basketball in some ways because their parents teach them about basketball. People figure out football in some ways because their parents or somebody in their community teaches them about football. Well, we want to build the same type of energy in racing. We're going to have to go teach families who may not, most of the times when we have kids that come into NXG, you know what their parents tell us? Mm-hmm. I have no idea why my black son wants to be a racer. I have no clue. When he watches the race, I walk out in another room because I have no clue what he's watching. We have kids that are teaching parents about the sport constantly. And I think we've got to get folks like you and others who are able to story tell, break down in very small increments. Here's the basics of racing. For somebody who's never watched a race before, I'm going to explain this to you in a fun way. And then this can be shared throughout the country. This is Racing 101 for the person who doesn't know anything about racing. I'm going to show you a race and talk you through the basic dynamics of why this is fun or why it's important. And I think if we did that more, the sport will blow up.
How much do you think the danger of it gets parents to kind of steer their kids away, get them a tennis racket or a set of golf clubs?
I truly don't think today, I don't hear people who talk about the dangers. For the most part, I hear parents who say, particularly on the go-karting level, they like it because the kids are not sitting in front of a computer all day, sitting in front of a PlayStation all day. They like it because it's a great tool for driver's ed training. So if you got a kid who's interested in karting, even if they don't become a driver, they become, that's great for introduction to driver's ed. And I don't necessarily hear about them talking about danger. I actually hear about that with football now, with everything about everything that's come out about concussions. You hear them talk about more about that. And there's a feeling that this sport, racing, has become more safe with helmets and how the car is designed. And they frequently see people wreck. Those who watch the races see people wreck, get out the car, walk away. Yeah. And so I hear far more concerns from cheerleading, gymnastics, football about injuries than racing. The biggest concern that parents and people getting the sport talk about is money. And how much money is this going to take me? If my kid is interested and passionate about this, what does it mean financially for my family? 1. 2, for people of color, it's, are we going to go to a bunch of events and be the only ones? And what does that mean psychologically? See, some people like being the only one, or they like being the first. I have never liked being the only one in the first. I take it back to the Discovery Channel. Don, when you watch the Discovery Channel and all the gazelles are trying to cross the river and there's alligators in the river, which animal usually gets killed? It's the one that's by himself and is the only one. I like packs and herds and groups. And so when people think about, man, my child is going to be the only one in this sport, sometimes they're like, I don't know if that's really where I want my child to be as the only person at this event, at this go-karting event. Can I trust that they're going to get a fair shake? Especially if I'm not connected and networked within the industry and within this sport. So we've got to figure out how to tell people and show people, how do you get the money? How do you build a network? How do you get sponsors? How does that even work to get sponsors, to get somebody to sponsor a go-kart or a sprint team? Where do you go? And that's what we're trying to convey to everybody in the industry, particularly people like you, Don, who have a platform, that type of outreach is going to be helpful. It's going to be transformative, and it's going to help us get to a better place.
One of my concerns always for anybody, it doesn't matter, is when you first start, that's the time to start working on sponsorship and find people, and they're out there. You got to knock on a lot of doors. I'm sure you've talked to Willie T, and he knocked on a lot of doors to get started, but once he got successful, all of a sudden they opened and said, hey, come and talk to me. He was the one and only when he was here, and it didn't seem to bother him that I'm aware of, and I don't know that he had a lot of grief. Coming up, he did, but once he got there. But my thought has always been, if you get the urge to think you want to pursue this as a profession, when you start, get yourself a couple companies and get them to agree to grow with you so that they don't have to spend $2 million right off the bat. They can start out for $10,000, $20,000, and as you progress, and they can see how they network and what it does for them as a sponsor, then they can grow with you. And I know one or two that I can think of that have done that, and it's worked. But you're right, the money is the problem. I remember when Al Unser Jr. was running to the end of his career, he said, I've got to do something I've never done before, ever. What's that? Find sponsors. Never had to before. Back when I first started, the teams had the sponsors, like Andy Granatelli, he had STP, so he brought you, he paid the bill, and a lot of them came with it. Ozzie Olsen, the Olsenite Eagles that Bobby Unser drove. Ozzie paid the bill and hired him to drive. There's a little bit of that coming back now. I see not everybody has to bring a sponsor. Some teams have them. And according to Willie, there's some really good drivers out there that are available and have the talent, in his opinion, and I guess he's watched several of them, that could develop into something. It's a matter of getting them in and getting them started and showing them how to do it. I can't imagine that you're going to go out and knock on doors for somebody, but you got to teach them, I think, how to do that and what to present to somebody when they agree to talk to you.
Absolutely. And like I said, I think Roger, I know that Roger's been having conversations with the owners and the teams. He's also doing it himself, and in conjunction with Coach Reed. They're out looking at talent and evaluating talent and working on that program of basically making sure that those kids who are out there who deserve a shot get a shot.
Well, that's what it's going to take is show them how it can happen. Like you say, a lot of parents, particularly with black parents, I would think, and who kids, there's not that many of them in basketball. They know what the heck that is, like you indicated. So you got to show them, here's how it can work, and here's what you need to do, and we'll help you to get you started and get you moving. I think, to me, that's what it's going to take, is to educate potential drivers and families getting into the sport that don't understand it, explain to them so they get to understand, this is how it works. You don't have to go to college on a degree of a basketball or a football scholarship. You can go, get your degree and still participate in the sport and find sponsorship and grow. And I think the potential is, hopefully, will be coming back to doing that.
And we're in conversations with Brandon Thompson, who's my counterpart at NASCAR. He's the chief vice president of diversity at NASCAR. As you know, they've had a Drive for Diversity program for quite some time. Max Siegel here in town has been very involved and engaged in that. And he has his own program called Rev Racing, where he's developed a number of drivers, including Bubba Wallace is one of the former Drive for Diversity as a graduate of that program. If you look at some of the pit crews at NASCAR, a lot of the folks who come out of that program are now working in the pits for NASCAR. And so they have a program that's been fairly successful at pipelining folks through. One of the things that I'm trying to talk to parents about is the multiple opportunities. I don't drive a car, but I'm living a pretty good life as a legal person in motorsports. And so, the car is we call it can be the shiny object. But as you point out, Don, you can go to, you can be in HR, you can be in marketing, certainly you can be in sales. We're trying to expose our community to the number of opportunities, business opportunities that are out there for women and people of color in motorsports that are fun. You know, imagine that, going to work every day and doing what you do. And even if you don't drive the car, you're having fun. And that's whether you're designing cars, whether you're painting them, whether you're doing the technical work behind the scenes, or whether you're strictly involved in the business end. There's just so many opportunities. And then you look around and you don't see the diversity that you should see that's representative of America.
Well, there's no question about that. And I agree with you. I think I've never driven a car, but I used to get excited to clean the shop up. When I worked for a race team, that's what I did, clean the shop. When the guys go to lunch, I put all the tools back where they came from, so when they come in, they just know where they are and go get them. And I got to push the car out into the pit lane and polish the car. I mean, and I loved it. And the people that were around in the marketing and sales were very much involved in the team. You didn't drive the car, but you made it possible for it to be there if you're in marketing. The PR person, that people knew who the driver and who the team was because the PR person told them.
Yep.
There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in the sport without necessarily driving if that's not your thing. I think this is one of the greatest sports there is. I think the diversity, not necessarily in color or minority part, but in the diversity of the many things you can do to be involved in it without actually driving. I mean, it's a huge sport that people really don't realize. You know, how did that guy get on television? Somebody knew somebody and put him there. That's how they got there. So you're right. And I think, you know, the door is open, in my opinion, after being here since 1961. It's open. You just got to figure out how do you get there.
Yep.
Help to show how you get here. How do you get there? Well, show them. And that's what your job is.
Yes, sir.
Others. How much different is the litigation where you came from to Indianapolis and the work that you do legal-wise?
Well, in terms of litigation, I went from a place where the more litigation we had, the more money we got paid to now I do not like litigation. I don't want litigation. And the goal is to completely avoid all litigation. That's not what we're here for. As a lawyer now, my job is to make, when my office actually overlooks the front gate. And when I see 3-4 generations come through these gates, grandfather, great-grandfather, daughter, son, all come through. My job as a lawyer to make sure they have the best time ever and that it's a memorable experience and that they're safe and that they don't get hurt and that they go up when they leave with a bunch of stuff that they bought and it's the happiest experience ever for them and they come back. That's my job as a lawyer. That's the biggest shift. Right now, most of my job is obviously sponsorships, drafting sponsorship agreements, everything from sweepstakes rules to how we deal with media, how we deal with our trademarks. People ask, how do we make money? What makes money is the wing and wheel and these logos that we have. And so how do we protect those, brand those, sell those? I worked on a lot of those agreements for both IMS INDYCAR and IMS Productions. Our vendor agreements, we've done a lot of work around the facility. As you know, Rogers invested, I think, over $15 million in the facility this year. All of those facility agreements, you talked about our TVs, concrete, asphalt, every aspect of the facility that requires a contract, I usually touch. Also event management. So when we have rentals of the track, where, you talked about SVRA, SCCA, when we had the Red Bull Air Race, when we had Lights at the Brickyard, all of those agreements, I sit in those meetings and help plan. I also work with our security team on worrying about issues related to terrorism, of course, but also everything related to trying to keep the facility safe. So I assist from a legal perspective on all of those issues. It's really an all comprehensive job, and it's some legal and it's some business. But it also gives you line of sight into pretty much every aspect of the industry.
Well, speaking of, as you mentioned, that you want people having a great experience, from everybody I've talked to that goes to the meetings when Roger's in town, that's his number one thing, is the fan. He wants the fans to enjoy when they come here. The race is the epitome, but while you're here, you're entertained, that you enjoy the sights and the sounds and the feel of being at the Speedway, leading up to the biggest event in the world, biggest single-day sporting event in the world, the Indianapolis 500. And that's been his goal, is to make sure it's fan-friendly in all aspects. And when I got to tour the place with Mark Miles and Pat from the events and facilities department, it was amazing what we saw. I mean, I used to see these big trash bins sitting out under the grandstand to put trash in. Well, now they got a fence around them, so you don't see that. You see a fence, you don't know what's behind it. And he has gone really overboard to make this place good to the eye and good to the project. Whatever you're there to see, a concert, you're there to see, just see, practice and qualifying, everything is fan friendly. And that's, from what I understand, that's his number one goal.
You're absolutely spot on. And when you talk about, people use the term the relentless pursuit of perfection when they talk about Roger, and you feel that, but it's not in a negative way. It's he wants everything to be done to a high standard, and he's willing to give you the tools and the resources to get the job done. And for him, the job is for fans to come here and love this place as much as he does. And let me tell you, that's a lot of love. Yeah. We had, when we were able to open the race for the Harvest, he was out here, shaking hands with people as they came in the gate. Yeah. He was greeting fans personally. Yeah. That's how he feels about this place. And, it's an honor and a privilege and an inspiration. When I first came, I'm going to tell you a story, Don. When I first came here, my son, I have twin boys, and one of them is really into racing. And at that time, I think he was young. He might have been 6 or 7. He asked me, Dad, are you going to work there forever? And I said, well, there's two things that might make me leave this place one day. One is if I got a call from F1, or two is if I got a call from Penske to work for Penske. And for a while, I'd run into people at Penske, and I'd always kind of laugh to myself, like, what's it like to work for Roger Penske? And then all of a sudden, he buys the place. And my son laughs about that now. He's 12 now, but he gets the biggest kick. He met Roger and shook his hand because he's in next gen, and he rides karts, and he won his race. And Roger came and shook his hand and told him how proud he was of him. And he said, my dad told me that one day he would end up working for you. And it's just a strange story that it came around that I ended up working for this person that I had a huge admiration for from the very first time that I got this job at the track, and that he's now my boss. It's like one of the strangest, weirdest blessings that I could come up with.
Well, he's quite a guy, and he obviously loves the place. He's won it, 17 times, so I guess he does have a spot in his heart for the place and has figured it out. And I know a number of guys who worked for him for 25, 30 years. Roger's very loyal. If you work with him, and and he's open to comments. If you got an idea, he'll listen to you. That's what I've been told.
That is true.
He hasn't thought of everything. People think he doesn't miss. No, he may not, but some of the ideas that he carries on, it came from you.
That is true.
He hasn't thought of that. So, and if you're looking for a female to use as a spokesperson to get women involved, I know a gal for you. She goes to the races by herself, and she's a huge, huge fan and loves the sport. I had to put you in touch with her and to get her feedback on what attracts her to this sport.
Would love to hear it.
I will do that. Well, I'll tell you what, I've taken up more of your time than you anticipated, I'm sure. It was very interesting. I'm a pleasure to have met you. I'd heard your name, but I'd never met you, obviously. And I'm assuming that Mr. Miles and Mr. Bowles and Mr. Fry and nobody, and Alex Damron, none of them said, don't talk to him. Allison didn't tell you, don't talk to him. So.
No one said that, Don. Absolutely not. Everyone loves you.
Well, I don't know about that, but I appreciate your time. I look forward to talking to you again. And as things progress and you make headway, let me know and we can chat again. Maybe not for an hour, but I'm interested in hearing how things move forward.
Okay, my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you have a wonderful day, Don. Thank you so much.
I will do my best. My guest has been Jimmie McMillan. He's a Senior Corporate Counsel for Penske Entertainment. He's also the man in charge of the upcoming diversity program. We look forward to seeing how that works out. We have several more guests in line for upcoming programs, so stay with us and keep an eye out. We'll try and let you know when they're available. This is Don Kay. We're at the Grand King Race Shops. My guest, as I said, was Jimmie McMillan, of the Senior Corporate Counsel for Penske Entertainment. Until the next time, Don Kay saying thanks for watching. See you again.